Police unintentionally discover something groundbreaking behind a furniture after 2 years of looking for this kid. But before we start, please give the video a like and make sure to subscribe to Wonderbot and hit the bell so you'll never miss any uploads from us. Realizing that your kid is missing would be one of the biggest blows that a parent could ever get hit by. You wouldn't be able to rest until you find them. The police were losing hope of finding anything helpful when they went inside the house of Diane Dobbs. A few years back, they'd gone through this very property. This time, however, they took a closer look. They'd been searching for so long that when they pushed aside one dresser kept in the house, it led them to question everything they'd already gathered. The story revolves around Shannon Wilfong and Michael Chikevdia. Although they dated, their love life was certainly not a smooth one. The pair did not have the most ideal relationship. However, the two still continued to stay by each other's side. They did not expect their relationship to meet with any change, but in 2002, when their son Ricky was born, everything started to get even more complex. They did care for each other, but they were always willing to try and make it work. They gave each other the effort to stay together ever since they first started to date. Even after their son was welcomed, the couple still had reasons to fight. They did all they could to live together as a family, but since their fight still continued, they mutually decided to end things. They decided to share custody of their kid, but things soon changed. The couple broke up, but they were willing to share custody as they thought it would be the best for little Ricky. Ever since the year 1942, Michael had worked as a National Guard and had been stationed in West Frankfort, which is nearby Royalton, Illinois. This was Michael's hometown. Michael, however, ended up being deployed in Iraq soon after Ricky was born. Even though he'd been separated from his son when he was born, Michael did not let this get him down. He wanted to be a good father and put as much effort as he could to act like one. He did all he could to stay in touch with Ricky during the time he was posted overseas. He could not wait until his new son could be held in his arms once again. He was missing him a lot. Ricky was with his mother during the time his father was deployed. When Michael's tour of duty finally got over in 2004, he was extremely excited to head back to Illinois, back home to see his son. Michael was eager to see his son really soon, but he was extremely anxious as he was a first-time father. He was looking forward to spending some quality time with Ricky, not knowing how things were going to turn out. Michael was so excited to finally be able to get to know his son since he had to spend so much time away overseas due to his job. When he got back and Shannon refused to give him time with Ricky, he had enough of her nonsense. In 2007, Michael filed a case against Shannon. He took her to court as she was not following their custody agreement. He hoped the judge reminded and ordered her to respect his visitation rights they previously agreed on. When the court ordered custody of Ricky to Michael, he was extremely happy to finally get the chance to be a hands-on father for his son. But things turned creepy and strange when Ricky and his mother Shannon disappeared, even before Michael had the chance to get his son home. Nobody knew where the two had run off to. Shannon and her son were listed as missing as of November 2007. There was another story that came up soon after it was established that Shannon had indeed run away with her son. Diane Dobbs, who was Shannon's mother, had revealed that Michael was abusive towards Ricky. And allegedly, she and her daughter had spoken up and confronted him about this before, in the past. But since there was no clear evidence that this happened, it was still just an allegation. And so this was no longer just between the parents of little Ricky. It did not just involve Michael and Shannon. Diane Dobbs had a lot to say about the father of her grandson. Diane made it clear that Shannon had taken Ricky far away from Michael, somewhere he could no longer hurt the little boy. It was not her life's mission to humiliate and ruin his reputation. It was clear from what she did that Diane was not going to shut up about her claims. She wanted everyone to know how vicious Michael allegedly was. He and Diane were only staying 3 miles away from each other. The length she'd gone to make sure everybody knew this ugly side of Michael was quite extreme. She'd kept posters and flyers claiming that Michael was a liar and an abuser. This wasn't all. Diane even gave out flyers at Michael's church and all over the neighborhood to scar his reputation. Michael could immediately tell that something was off, that she had something to hide. When Michael had that inkling about Diane hiding something, he quickly turned to the cops. The police responded by searching through Diane's house for any kind of hint or signs that lead towards Ricky's discovery. Michael thought there must have been a clue or the other that led him to the boy. Sadly, the police had not been able to identify anything significant to help with his son's disappearance. And even though they'd already looked through the house and property, it was time for yet another search. A tip had been given to the police that led them to have another look at Diane's home once more. Since they'd already investigated, they were sure to be more careful this time. They were looking through every room of the two-story home and did all they could to not miss anything or any detail. When they got to one room, everything seemed normal and ordinary at first glance. However, something in the room led them to believe that there might be more there. They saw that a wooden dresser had been kept against one of the walls. The officers decided to move the dresser to see if anything was under it or perhaps behind it. What it revealed was something nobody expected to find. As soon as the mysterious dresser was moved, what was hiding behind it was something fit for a horror movie. The police discovered a hole that took them inside a small 12 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 4 feet tall dark room that was present behind the dresser. What was inside this room was even more shocking. It was Shannon hiding in the room with little Ricky. From what the authorities discovered that day, it became quite clear what had been happening all along. There was no hiding the truth anymore. It was clear that Michael was indeed not a villain, despite the picture that was painted about him by Shannon and Diane. Cops could conclude that for about 2 years. Diane had kept both her daughter and grandson inside this room. They took both, and the truth was heartbreaking. After realizing that Ricky had been kept in hiding by his mom and grandmom, the police finally took him out of the unbearably small room. When he was in the custody of the police, they saw a weird behavior that made them feel terribly sad. Sergeant Stan Diggs of the Illinois Police Department revealed, "We let him out of the patrol car and he ran around like he'd never seen outdoors." This would have been such a sad sight for anyone to see because we all know that a child normally likes to spend time outdoors and stay active. They could not believe that his own mother had put him through something like this. He then went on. It was actually very sad. He was very happy to be outside. He said he never goes outside. The cops were adamant on giving little Ricky and Michael the justice they both deserved. Like her son, the police also took Shannon into custody. However, she was taken into custody for a whole other reason. Shannon was immediately charged with felony child abduction. She'd vanished with her son and had clearly kept him in an extremely unhealthy environment. Along with her mother Diane was also charged with aiding and abetting. The two were arrested. Shannon was still not ready to go down without a fight. Even after all the damage she'd done, she was still not admitting to her faults. She was still not willing to let Michael take her son. Then Shannon was freed on bail and misconstrued the story to make it appear as though Ricky had enjoyed freedom over the last 2 years. The evidence that was there and her story were clashing. The police had to go on with a few more investigations as Shannon was not telling up on the fact that she'd endangered her son's safety and well-being. The neighbors were questioned and their claims all pointed towards not seeing Ricky outside Diane's home. He had indeed been kept inside the house all along. The child also exhibited signs of isolation but was showing good spirits. When they studied the boy's behavior, they could tell that he'd not been out in public. Shannon and Diane had both been keeping him out of sight for 2 years. Sergeant Diggs then explained, "For someone who's been isolated in that house with no other outside beings, he's very social, very polite, very talkative little boy." It was not a losing battle for Diane and Shannon. Diane and Shannon tried really hard to flip their story to make people believe that they were not criminals, but their actions were unforgivable. After an interview on Good Morning America, Diane was arrested one more time. She and Shannon were battling legal charges, and Ricky had to be placed in the custody of Michael's relatives. The case called for an intensive inspection. After trying to prove their innocence, the actions they had committed were not in cohesion with their stories, so it ultimately bit them back. But in the year 2011, Shannon finally pled guilty and had to pay a fine of $1,500. After this, she'd been kept on probation for 2 years. This might seem a little unfair, but finally, Michael was cleared from all the claims that had been made against him. After being separated again and again from his dear son, Michael finally got what he had always been longing for. The eager father got permanent custody of Ricky after the case was closed. After all that he'd been through, it must have been such a relief to finally know for sure that his son would not be taken away from him anymore. He then took an early retirement from the National Guard a year after to be able to spend time with his son. Since Shannon had messed up so much of his time with Ricky, Michael was ready to give all his effort to make sure his son had a pleasant life. And since he was a single dad, he did his best to give Ricky a comfortable life and a stable home. Something he'd been striving to be since a few years back. It was neither the father nor the child's fault that their life had become so excessively complicated. At the end, we want to know your opinion about the story in the comments box below.